Oh, I don't think, okay, there we go. First, I want to thank Brendan for asking me to come to this conference. My eyes have been widely opened about a lot of topics, and when I hear an elder statesman of the community like Charlie speak about things he didn't know, kind of makes me feel a lot better that there are a couple of things that I didn't know. I don't know how many of you have been following the news as of late, but a few weeks ago, November 13th, I was flying back from San Francisco. I had been out in the Bay Area working with Intuit. My blind spot is making QuickBooks accessible for the blind for the very first time, and I'm kind of proud of that. 90% functionality, launching it probably in the coming weeks. And I was on my way back. I was in Philadelphia, catching a connecting flight to Long Island, and got on a plane. I was given the option, as the DOT team has presented, and about how some disabled people get options of going on first or out to the bus to go from the tarmac to the plane, and I was afforded that liberty. However, I was the last one off the bus because everybody's in a rush to get on the plane. So ultimately, my dog and I were the last ones on. And as I walked on the plane, the flight attendant mentioned, "Oh, if I had known, I would have saved the bulkhead seat." Now, again, the running theme from the Vaughn's team and throughout when Carmen was speaking is responsibility. I take responsibility for self-identifying as a blind traveler who travels with a guide dog. I don't like showing up and surprising people because I have an 85-pound dog. So on my profile, I'm identified as a person who's a handler. So that she didn't look at the manifest beforehand was bothersome, but I'm a very versed traveler. I traveled no less than 10 times this year already, and I'm traveling again Friday. So I was taken to my seat by the same woman, and I was taken to the back of a prop plane, maybe 40 seats in total, and there were 2 seats on my left and 2 seats on my right, and I sat right in the middle with my feet out into the aisle. So as I'm putting away my items, the flight attendant reminded me that we needed to stow my dog. That annoyed me. But I said, well, I don't know where I'm going to stow my dog. I don't have a seat. She said, well, the dog needs to be under a seat. So when I'm hearing and getting some of the things I believe as a new member of this community validated from Barbara and Ann, it just makes me realize that I really responded the best way I could and the right way I could. And I said to her, I don't have a seat. What do we do? Now, again, hearing that they could have done some seat assignments or reassignments showed me that this woman was intentionally blind to my needs and to protocols. So the lady next to me, Mary Comfort, was kind enough to say, well, put him under my seat. Now, any of you who use a service animal, Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, our animals don't like to be in front of anybody else but daddy or mommy. So right there was a problem, but this woman and I just connected within moments of sitting next to each other, so we did that. Doxy was very happy to be with her, but 40 minutes into sitting on the tarmac, Doxy wasn't very happy to be anywhere. So he kind of snuck out, had his head under my legs, had his hind quarters under her legs, never once in the aisle, per se, though his head was under my feet, where my feet were also in the aisle. She comes back, now remember, 40 minutes into the flight, sitting on the tarmac. Sir, I told you that dog needs to be under the seat. I said, okay. Begrudgingly, I put the dog back under the seat. 40 minutes later. Now, we've lost track of the time. We were having such a wonderful dialogue with everybody around us. And dog does his routine, sneaks out, paws on daddy's foot, head's on daddy's foot, happy as a lark, content, calm, and collected. And this woman comes back and says to me again, I told you that dog needs to be under the seat. I don't want to have to tell you again. I said to her very firmly and very definitively, "Why are you being so evil?" And she said, "If I were evil, I would just turn this plane around. We wouldn't be having a conversation." So I said, "Well, I don't like your aggressive tone. I'm not being aggressive." And I said, "Your short staccato tone tells me you're trying to escalate this to a level I'm not comfortable taking it to. I want to get to Long Island, so why don't we do this? Why don't you go back to your seat? When you're ready to take off, you give me a high sign, I'll shove the dog under the seat, we'll be in Long Island in 45 minutes, and this will be a distant memory." She didn't like that. Now, we were sitting on the tarmac an hour and 43 minutes when we were told the plane was being turned around. Didn't know why. We all assumed the plane was being taken out of service. Everyone thought that. On comes who really should be, if he's not. His name is Lamar. And right now his last name is escaping, but I'll scream it out in a moment. Lamar comes on, and if he's not a CRO or a PSS, he really should be hired away from an airline that's going to appreciate who he is. He came on, Lamar, not Burton, it'll come. He came onto the plane, and he said, "Mr. Rizzi, can I help you off the plane?" Now, I assumed they were helping the poor blind guy. So I accepted his kindness, and I opened up the overhead compartment, and I took out my bags, and I closed the compartment, and I got this eerie feeling. Followed Lamar, got to the door, and I said, "Excuse me, am I the only one getting off this plane?" And his response was, "We'll discuss that inside." Now, had I known about a CRO or a PSS or any variation on an alphabetical theme that would have helped me, I would not have gone to my Brooklyn brat mindset, and Charlie knows I have that, don't you, Charlie? And I used some colorful language, arguing amongst other things that I self-identify. I've flown US Airways so many times, and off I went, taking that walk of shame, as I called it, into the terminal, wondering how I'm going to get home. Somebody's at the airport waiting for me who doesn't know where I am. And having people in your life who don't see your disability, but see your ability, and then they don't see you, it kind of reinforces their social impact on, okay, well, he's disabled, I've got to worry now. So there was a lot of stuff going on. It was the worst moment of my entire life since being told I would never see again. And that was 8 years ago. So I'm inside, I'm uncontrollable, and at one point Lamar says, "Mr. Rizzi, please stop yelling at me. I think I understand." For a moment there, I'm like, oh my God, I can go home. Well, Lamar continues to speak with his colleague Linda, and she said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, when I walked onto that plane, there was no agitation. There was no immediate danger to the crew or to the fellow passengers. Everybody was content. Nobody really knew they were on the tarmac for as long as they seemed to have been. The dog was sleeping. And to make matters worse, Linda, there were 7 empty seats on that plane. That somebody could have moved just one person, and I and the dog could have had our own row." And Linda said, clear as she was, "You mean that dog could have had his own row?" And I looked at him and I said, "You mean my dog and I could have had our own row?" And he said, "Yes." Now, at that moment, I didn't know what was going on the plane. But the moment I stepped off the plane, Mary, Chris, Kurt, Arthur, Barbara, Pat, and the list goes on, went at this woman and went at the captain and said, "She's lying. This never happened." Chris's brother's blind, and Chris took it very personally that I was treated this way. It got so heated that the flight attendant, aka stewardess, because I don't think she deserved to be called a flight attendant, was emotionally distraught and couldn't fly, couldn't deal with anything. Now, I didn't know this was going on. I'm in the terminal, and I hear Lamar say, "Oh my God." And I said, what the hell could be happening now? Are they going to bring handcuffs? Oh, I did not know. Because I have no vision whatsoever, no usable vision. And Lamar just said, "Mr. Rizzi, everybody's getting off the plane." And with that, the door flung open, and everybody was irate, screaming, "This is unfair. If the blind guy doesn't get on the plane with his dog, we're not going. She needs to be fired. She needs to be retrained." Nothing that she said happened on that plane ever happened. Now, again, Charlie, you can attest to this. I'm never at a loss for words. I was speechless. My eyes teared up, and what was the worst 43 minutes of my life, after being told I would never see again, while standing in that terminal, became one of the most empowering, uplifting, positive moments of my life. That 35 people got off the plane in protest, in solidarity, to stand behind a member of your community, speaks to the humanity that this is what this is really about. This is not about me and my guide dog. This is about people standing up for what was right, without knowing about a CRO. 35 people in that concentrated space decided to take a stand when they all could have just turned a blind eye and a deaf ear, which many of us have anyway, and took off to Long Island. There was a couple on the plane, Arthur and Barbara. They had just flown in from Europe, traveling 24 hours for the entire day, first class, and insisted on getting off that plane and joining me on a bus ride back to Long Island, which was about 3.5 hours. So, I guess what I want to leave you with is, don't take anything laying down. I am not saying get argumentative and verbally abusive as I was accused of being, but stand your ground. Now that we know, I know, we have CROs to rely on. We can say, "Excuse me, Miss Flight Attendant, I think you might be mistaken, so why don't you go and get us a CRO, a conflict resolution official, because we need to see the truth in this matter." As I said before, a colleague of mine and Charlie's, Becky Barnes, with Guiding Eyes, she and her husband were told they couldn't fly. I think it was a Delta airline. They could not fly in the same row together because they both had guide dogs. Now, I had another friends of mine, Donna and Glenn Pamar, who also are handlers, who also were told they could not sit in the same row together, and unfortunately were not as effective at standing their ground as Ron Davidson was. So there's inconsistencies, and that's what I was talking about before. We need to find a platform upon which to have a consistent discussion about policies, like Charlie talked of, or regulations, and enforcing them, and mitigating the confusion and the antiquated perception, and educating people on both sides of Charlie's fence about the truth of the matter. Too much speculation in my particular instance has impacted my traveling. I'm a professional, and unfortunately I think we aren't collectively viewed as viable sometimes. We're diminished, and as that video that Carmen shared today, my ability is dissed, so don't diss my ability. I am just as able as anybody else to do just about anything, provided I have access to the right tools that promotes my ability, which restores my infinite possibilities. So thank you for having me today, Brandon. I appreciate it, and thank you for letting me share my story.
Al, thank you. And I will attest to Al's character before.
Thank you.
I did not own